Welcome to Read Aloud. I am starting off with a correction from yesterday's video. So yesterday I said we were in chapter 14 and going through to chapter 15. Actually, we were at the end of chapter 13 going on to 14. Today we are on the last page of chapter 14 and moving into chapter 15. So I just wanted to correct that before we get started. And we left off with Stuart being a sad, sulking little mouse, right? Because the canoe was damaged and he was so sad that his idea in his brain of how the day was going to look was very different than the reality that was really going on. Okay, so let's keep going. Well, Harriet said, it started to rain. I guess I'd better be running along if you are not going to take me paddling in your canoe. I don't see why you have to sit here and sulk. Would you like to come up to my house? After dinner, you could take me to the dance at the country club. It might cheer you up. No, thank you, replied Stuart. I don't know how to dance. Besides, I plan to make an early start in the morning. I'll probably be on the road at daybreak. Are you going to sleep out in the rain? Asked Harriet. Certainly, said Stuart, or crawl in under the canoe. Harriet shrugged her shoulders. Well, she said, goodbye, Mr. Little. Goodbye, Miss Ames, said Stuart. I'm sorry if our evening on the river had to end like this. So am I, said Harriet. And she walked away along the wet path toward Tracy's Lane, leaving Stuart alone with his broken dreams and his damaged canoe. Here is a picture of her leaving. And we are in chapter 14. No, chapter 15, Miss Kate. Chapter 15. Heading north. Stuart slept under the canoe that night. He awakened at 4 to find the rain had stopped. The day would break clear. Already the birds were beginning to stir and make bright sounds in the branches overhead. Stuart never let a bird pass without looking to see if it was Margalo. At the end of the town, he found a filling station and stopped to take on some gas. 5, please, said Stuart to the attendant. The man looked at the tiny automobile in amazement. 5 what? He asked. 5 drops, he said. But the man shook his head and said that he couldn't sell such a small amount of gas. Why can't you? Demanded Stuart. You need the money and I need the gas. Why can't we work something out between us? The filling station man went inside and came back with the medicine dropper. Stuart unscrewed the cap of the tank and the man put in 5 drops of gasoline. I've never done anything like this before, he said. Better look at the oil, too, said Stuart. After everything had been checked and the money had been paid for, Stuart climbed in, started the engine, and drove out onto the highway. The sky was growing brighter, and along the river the mist of morning hung in the early light. The village was still asleep. Stuart's car purred along smoothly. Stuart felt refreshed and glad to be on the move again. Half a mile out of town, the road forked. That's a really good term, forked. Now, when you think of your fork that you use that you eat with every day, right, there's like these little things called prongs on it. So when they're saying a road forks, what they mean is that it goes into different directions, kind of like those prongs in the fork all point different ways. So they're in a fork in a road, which means there are different ways to go. And I'm going to show you real quick the illustration of the man at the gas station, or what they refer to as the filling station. Okay. One road seemed to go off toward the west. The other road continued north. Stuart drew up to the side of the northbound road and got out to look the situation over. To his surprise, he discovered that there was a man sitting in the ditch, leaning against a signpost. Never mind, the image I showed you was of the man leaning against the signpost, but it looks like he's still at the fill-up station because that's a gas tank. Interesting. The man wore spurs on his legs. He also wore a heavy leather belt. Sorry, I lost my place. And Stuart realized that he must be a repairman for the telephone company. "Good morning," said Stuart in a friendly voice. The repairman raised one hand to his head in a salute. Stuart sat down in the ditch beside him and breathed deeply of the fresh, sweet air. "It's going to be a fine day," he observed.
"Yes," agreed the repairman, "a fine day. I am looking forward to climbing my poles."
So, I was right the first time. This is the gas station. And down here is the repairman, or what we might say today as like an SDG&E worker, somebody who helps repair the telephone wires and such. Now, I can tell that this guy was the one they were just describing, because if you look at his boots, he's got little things on the back. He also has the leather belt that they used to describe him. "I wish you fair skies in a tight grip," said Stuart. "By the way, do you ever see any birds at the tops of your poles?"
"Yeah, I see birds in great numbers,"
replied the repairman. "Well, if you ever run across a bird named Margalo," said Stuart, "I'd appreciate if you would drop me a line. Here's my card."
"Describe the bird,"
said the repairman, taking a pad and pencil. "Brown," said Stuart. "Brown with a streak of yellow on her bosom."
"Know where she's from?"
asked the man. "She comes from fields once tall with wheat, from pastures deep in fern and thistle. She came from vales of meadow sweet, and she loves to whistle." The repairman wrote it all down briefly.
"Fields, wheat, pastures, fern and thistle, vales, meadows sweet. Enjoys whistling."
Then he put the pad back in his pocket and tucked Stuart's card away in his wallet.
"I'll keep my eyes open,"
he promised. Stuart thanked him. They sat for a while in silence. Then the man spoke.
"Which direction are you headed?"
he asked. "North," said Stuart.
"North is nice," said the repairman. "I've always enjoyed going north, of course. Southwest is a fine direction, too."
"Yes, I suppose it is," said Stuart thoughtfully.
"And there's east," continued the repairman. "I once had an interesting experience on an easterly course. Do you want me to tell you about it?"
"No, thanks," said Stuart. The repairman seemed disappointed, but he kept right on talking.
"There's something about north," he said. "Something that sets it apart from all other directions. A person who is heading north is not making any mistake, in my opinion."
"That's the way I look at it," said Stuart. "I'd rather expect that from now on I shall be traveling north until the end of my days."
"Worse things than that could happen to a person,"
said the repairman. "Yes, I know," answered Stuart.
following a broken telephone line north, I have come upon some wonderful places," continued the repairman. "Swamps where cedars grow and turtles wait on logs, but not for anything in particular. Fields bordered by crooked fences, broken by years of standing tall. Orchards so old that they have forgotten where their farmhouse is. In the north, I have eaten my lunch in pastures rank with ferns and junipers, all under fair skies with the wind blowing. My business has taken me into spruce woods on winter nights where the snow lay deep and soft. A perfect place for a carnival of rabbits."
And there's a drawing, an illustration here of a road. I'm not sure what it is quite yet.
I have sat at peace on the freight platforms of railroad junctions in the north.
A railroad junction is kind of like where the railroad meets another direction, or maybe another track. Junction, junction, junction. Okay. This voice is hard to do. I need a sip of water. Sorry, guys. Okay, let's keep going.
In the warm hours with the warm smells, I know fresh lakes in the north, undisturbed except by fish and hawk and, of course, by the telephone company, which has to follow its nose. I know all these places well. They are a long way from here. Don't forget that. And a person who is looking for something doesn't travel very fast.
That's perfectly true, said Stuart. Well, I guess I'd better get going. Thank you for your friendly remarks.
Not at all, said the repairman. I hope you find that bird.
Stuart rose from the ditch, climbed into his car, and started up the road that led toward the north. The sun was just coming up over the hills on his freight. As he peered ahead in the great land that stretched before him, the way seemed long, but the sky was bright, and he somehow felt he was headed in the right direction. And that's the end of the book. Can you believe it? I want to hear your predictions. What do you guys think? Oh my goodness. Does he find Margalo? Does he go back home? Does he go to see Harriet on the way home after finding Margalo? What do you guys think? Is that an ending? All right. So that's one thing I want to hear from you. Another thing I want to hear from you is a book review. I have found a couple designs of ways that you can review a book, and I will go over in a separate video kind of what you do to review the book, and we're going to review the first book, our first one together, and it'll be on Stuart Little. And then each of you will get to review of any book of your choice. Maybe it's one that you read with your parents. Maybe it's a chapter book that is your favorite chapter book. Maybe it's one that you read in literature circle. It can be any book that you just really enjoy, and you're going to review it as a critic, as a reading critic. And so what a critic does is you critique or you analyze the book. So it could even be a book review about a book you don't like. And you can tell in the review, you will tell why you love it or why you thought it was not a good book. And then we'll rate the book on our sheet on a scale of 1 to 10. So was this 10? Was this the most amazing book you've ever read and you recommend it to everybody across the world? Or is it maybe a 7? It was a good book. I would recommend it, but I probably won't read it again. Or it was a 1. That was the worst book I've ever read. I don't even know what the point of the story was. There was no pictures. I couldn't even finish it because I didn't know what was happening. All of that stuff. I am really excited. This will be the first time many of you have done a book review. So keep in mind the ending here. That's kind of what we call a cliffhanger. That means you don't really have an ending. It just kind of stops and you have to imagine an ending of your own. It also could lead to another book, like Stuart Little too. I don't know. I will schedule 2 different groups, maybe 3, depending on how we can get everybody together to do the book reviews. If you're an older student, obviously your book review will be more detailed with more writing. I hope you really enjoyed Stuart Little. All right, I hope to see you guys soon. Okay, bye.